My name is Margaret Klein Salamon, and I'm a climate punk because our world is worth fighting for.
Hi, this is Climate Punk, and my name is Thomas Kolster. I'm behind the microphone on an important mission to find radical new answers to the climate emergency. So, no BS. And I have a very, very interesting guest for you here today, which is Margaret Klein Salamon. And she's the executive director of the Climate Emergency Fund. She is the founder of the Climate Awakening, and moreover, she is also behind the climate mobilization. So, a very, very interesting woman. And even more so, she's written a book, a self-help book around climate that is called Facing the Climate Emergency. And a second edition is coming out 30th of May. So, admittedly, I got tons to talk to Margaret about. So, welcome, Margaret. What made a clinical psychologist become a climate activist?
Thank you so much for having me. And the answer to your question is really, I had a kind of climate freak out. I became, while I was in my clinical psychology PhD program, I became extremely alarmed by the climate emergency. It started to feel like there was a red light going off in my face, like sirens. And then I had an amazing experience of being challenged by a friend to do everything that I can to try to solve the problem. And what it was so amazing about that is I had never imagined. I mean, like, that's just too big. It's so much bigger than anything that I had ever thought. But once I got that challenge, try to solve it, I thought, oh yeah, of course that's what I want to do. I want that more than anything. So that was 10 years ago.
Amazing that the way that you found your purpose. I think I had a sort of similar awakening, which was sort of provoked by our failing climate summit in Copenhagen. In fact, when we were hosting that, and I think that was COP15 or something. So that's actually been some years ago. One of the things that really sort of also drew me to your message, and what I think makes it even more relevant right now, is this recent climate report that came out from scientists from across the world, the IPCC report, that sort of states that we should have actually acted yesterday and we all need to mobilize. It's all hands on deck. And that's what this message that I picked up from you, that you've been saying quite some time. So how do we get there? How do we create this mass mobilization?
Well, that is the key question. Just to comment, I totally agree 100% that we should have started lowering and even eliminated our carbon emissions years ago. The idea that there is a carbon budget left that we can safely burn is, it really makes no sense if you look at how the climate impacts that we're seeing today with 1.1 degrees Celsius of warming, that we just need to do this as quickly as humanly possible. So for me, I get great inspiration from history, and particularly what the United States and our allies did during World War II, when we transformed our economy in just a few years from a consumer economy to a war economy. And I mean, the transformation of our economy and society during that time was just absolutely massive. I mean, for example, women started working in factories, often for the first time. 10% of Americans moved to a different state to work in a war job, and 40% of vegetables were grown at home in victory gardens. Gasoline, meat, sugar, and other goods were rationed and everyone got a fair share. And the top income tax rate was 94%. So these policies, these shifts are, really hard to imagine today. Rationing, this is like the boogeyman of environmentalism, but we did it before.
Yeah.
So having that confidence that we did it before, I think is really critical. And sharing that history, because then once we do collectively realize that we're in an existential emergency and that we're all threatened, we have a model of rapid transformation in the face of an existential threat that, obviously it's different. It can't be exactly the same, but we've done it before.
No, I agree. And I think that, now with sort of us being maybe still in the pandemic or kind of out of the pandemic, we also did see quite a substantial shift. But I think one of the things that I find really inspiring about your message, this idea about obviously collective systemic action. And then this other thing that I definitely feel connected with is this idea that I'm anxious. I often feel that I'm not doing enough and I feel helpless. And then when you talk about sort of war efforts and big collective actions, I almost lose my breath. And I'm like, what can I, in fact, do as an individual? So if I should sort of hand you the mic and say, so what advice do you have for me to cope with that pressure and not just to give up because I feel, okay, if not everybody is sort of joining this war effort against the climate, I might just skip it altogether.
Okay, so first of all, the feelings of wanting to give up or feeling helpless and hopeless about the climate emergency are totally normal. And it's important to have compassion for yourself and for other people for feeling that way. And it's also critical to recognize the role that activism, particularly disruptive activism, can play in spurring rapid transformation. So at the Climate Emergency Fund, at which I'm the executive director, we raise money for and make grants to disruptive climate activists. So, for example, some of our grantees disrupt tapings of TV segments or meetings of banks and their investors, and throwing soup on paintings or disrupting sporting events. And these actions, I believe, are extremely high impact because we are in a collective delusion of normalcy, right? And we're going through the motions, acting as if things were normal. And when what we need to do is wake up and realize how incredibly dangerous the situation is and transform, take these steps in our economy and society that are necessary for rapid decarbonization. And so to do that, we need to enter emergency mode. We need to treat the emergency like an emergency rather than, like I said, just this kind of inertia of normalcy, kind of like zombies or sleepwalking that we're doing now. So what these disruptive activists do is, it's like they're shaking us awake, right? They're saying, stop what you're doing. We need to get real.
Yeah. And how, because I really love the way that you frame this around disruptive activism. And I think activism, if we look at activism in a historic perspective, have obviously created massive shifts and also normalized things that weren't normal before. But there's also a lot of criticism around activism in recent years, where there is this, for example, the Climate Extinction Rebellion in the UK, where people are criticizing the activism for, stopping regular people going to work, for, disrupting the normal sort of working of society. So I'm curious to know sort of your thoughts about where sort of does activism stop and begin? So what's sort of the lines of activism, and how can we use activism in a progressive and positive way?
So the first thing to keep in mind is that activism is never popular. By definition, we're talking about a small group of people telling a much larger group of people that we need to change.
Yeah.
And, that just always meets with resistance from the status quo. So, Martin Luther King Jr., when he was alive, was, had a very low approval rating. He was not supported and viewed as a hero by the broad society during that time. It's only after the social movements that we look back and realize, oh, wow, they really had a point. They were really contributing something incredibly meaningful to our society. And in fact, maybe we needed to be disrupted.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the same thing with the suffragettes. It's, they were, especially in the United Kingdom, I mean, they were very disruptive. And yeah, now who's going to look back into history and say, they should have been more polite and better behaved?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but we do that to the activists that are, just trying to protect all of us.
And so what does great activism look like in your eyes? And also, do you feel activism has changed? I think now with the digital, I think we see a lot of sort of digital activism. So those two components. So what does great activism look like in your eyes, and sort of where's the activism heading, and has the sort of digital space changed activism today?
So the most important thing is that activism maintains strict nonviolent discipline. It's really important for the success of the movement to do that. If the movement becomes violent, it is just so easy to be totally dismissed, and also bring down, a violent reaction. So that's, but within that space of nonviolent disruptive activism, there's just a huge range of things that you can do. And the activists are incredibly creative. That's, it's one thing I just love, is seeing what they do. And I'm like, wow, I would have never thought of that. For example, Scientist Rebellion has been recently putting blindfolds on statues to signal, that we're not seeing the crisis, that we're acting as though we were blind. And so what I like about that action is the creativity and the symbolism. Another action or that's happened many times that I think is outstanding is the blockading of private airports. So this is also extremely symbolic. It tells a very clear story that we're talking about the richest people in the world who fly on private planes, who pollute just an incredible amount. It's so unjust. And so, in Amsterdam, where after months of protest, the airport announced that it's going to stop allowing private planes, they had these wonderful actions where they were bicycling on the airport tarmac, preventing any plane from taking off or landing. But so this contrast between the bikes and the planes, the private planes, was really, really strong. So I guess in summary, good action is nonviolent, it's disruptive, and it tells a story.
I love the storytelling part, and it's almost like the little artist statue trick is almost like a little art piece in itself in so many ways. And where do you think, in the second part of the question, in terms of digital, what sort of digital activism out there is inspiring you at the moment, and where do you see the sort of creativity and heart in digital activism?
I don't know as much about digital activism, but I do think there is inherent and important political value in talking about climate and talking about it in a personal and emotional and authentic way. Not just sharing statistics or articles, but saying, is anyone else out there feeling this way? Is anyone else, how do I plan my future when this is coming down? That there's what Yale Climate Communications Program calls the spiral of silence, that people don't talk about climate because other people don't talk about climate, and it feels awkward to do. So I think the digital and social media space is a really good opportunity to break the silence and start raising this conversation with your friends and family and network.
And so those two disciplines, because now we sort of talked about the anxiety and activism sort of as an outlet for that anxiety. So if any of our viewers here today sort of wants to embrace the activist within themselves, do you have any good advice? Anything you learned along the way?
I wrote a book about this, which is called Facing the Climate Emergency: How to Transform Yourself with Climate Truth, which is a self-help book, really on this topic, that the first step is to really look at the crisis, with clear eyes, trying to not totally freak out to the point that you shut down, but really try to understand what's going on. The second step is to process your fear, grief, and other painful feelings that are inevitable and cannot be skipped. The third step is to rethink your life story. So what if what you've been through so far in your life has been preparing you for this moment? What if it's not a coincidence that you're alive during this time of incredible consequence? And so to try to rethink your identity in light of what's going on. And the fourth step is to enter emergency mode, which we've been talking about, the understanding that these are not normal times and that we're in danger and that we need to act with everything that we've got, both as a country and as a global community, but also as individuals. So then step 5 is to actually go join the disruptive climate movement. You have to go through that kind of emotional journey of self-discovery to get ready. And so once you're ready to do that, once it's okay, what can I do? I'm ready. It's still not an easy answer because, where do I fit in? What group should I join? But some important things to keep in mind with that is there's climate groups all over the world. I just learned today that in Philadelphia, my niece is helping to lead a school strike at her school. So there's I know, I'm so proud. So school strikes, the Sunrise Movement, Extinction Rebellion, these are groups that have chapters. So you can join, or you could create one. So yeah, looking for a group to join, that's one part of it. But also thinking like, where do I fit in with my particular skills and experiences and resources and availability, right? So some people go and do the actions, but there's plenty of people who contribute in other ways, such as, cooking for activists, picking up activists if they've been arrested, taking notes at the meeting, and then emailing everyone to remind them of the action points. It's really a huge amount that goes into these movements. And so what I recommend is to, really get started with a kind of attitude of exploration.
I absolutely love that. It does seem like there is a role for everyone in finding an activist movement that sort of fits them. And I love your little 5-step plan, and especially also around sort of rethinking your life story. I think this was something that for a lot of people coming out through on the other side of the pandemic was a thing that a lot of people thought about. What am I here for? What's my purpose? What am I doing at work? So Margaret, for those folks who might not feel that running around in the streets with a sign in their hand, or they might not have time, but really want to do their utmost to push forward and respond to the climate emergency, do you have anything that they could do that's more of an easy little action?
So donating funds is very important to activist groups. So for people who don't feel that they can make the time to get involved and go to meetings and do actions as a volunteer, donating funds can be really effective. At the Climate Emergency Fund, we raise money and make grants to climate activists. It's a non-endowed fund, so everything we give away, we have to raise. And so from this vantage point, I really get to see how far the activists can take a small grant, that because they're volunteer powered, because they're so passionate, the money is just facilitating what these volunteers want to accomplish. So donating to activist groups or to the Climate Emergency Fund, which then distributes that money, is a great way to support.
So here's actually one easy thing you could do here on Earth Day. I'll encourage you to follow that advice and obviously donate what you have and what you find appropriate. So obviously it is Earth Day, so we are obviously celebrating everything from the Amazon forest to our oceans to the beautiful animals within it. And we haven't been the best guests of our beautiful little blue planet, to say the least, since the 1970s, where the first Earth Day was celebrated. We are twice as many human beings on the planet, and we also have more than doubled our carbon footprint. So we sort of need to get our act together. In this context, Margaret, what does Earth Day mean for you? And do you think that this sort of one-day approach still has a role to play, or is just an excuse for me to relax 364 other days of the year?
I am very inspired by the thousands of people, tens of thousands of people from Extinction Rebellion who are protesting outside of Westminster right now, this weekend on Earth Day. So I think in the best case, we just use this day as a rallying point for continued and escalating action. But yeah, I do also agree. I mean, it's like, it's like if your house is on fire, you kind of need to deal with that right now. This isn't the day that we deal with those issues. It's like, it's inconvenient. The climate emergency is terribly inconvenient.
So for you, it's an everyday thing. It's not specific on a specific day. But do you have any fun memories of Earth Day? Did Earth Day mean something special for you when you were growing up, or probably even today?
In school, we learned about sustainability, and it was focused on individual consumption and lifestyle choices, right? Like reduce, reuse, recycle. And those messages, I took them in. They mattered to me, but I wish that in school and the other messages that I was getting, I wish that they had emphasized politics and systems. I fear that by focusing so much on what can one person do, like by defining what one person can do just about what they buy or their lifestyle, it's missing the fact that one person can actually be a part of changing the world, and that is where we should be aiming.
A really, really encouraging message here on Earth Day, obviously to everyone, and obviously Margaret also have a 5-step plan. So there's in fact no excuse for you not to find the activist within you. It is needed. And this little ladder thing, what we're going to do is we're going to go down and then we're going to go back in time to 2001. And don't worry, it won't demand any sort of fossil fuel traveling. And what we'll do is we'll watch this little campaign from 2001 from the United Nations, made in Africa by Saatchi and Saatchi, called Home. So let's just roll this.
That was really interesting. I thought it was powerful. I had an emotional reaction of, feeling upset. I thought it was powerful in terms of showing the interconnectedness, like with climate and other environmental issues. There's a tendency to say, oh, those are like somewhere else. That doesn't have to do with me. So the way that they brought it home, I thought was really interesting. My only critique is the one that I've already said, is it would seem to imply potentially that the answer is to change what you're doing at home, which is fine. I mean, I certainly, have made lifestyle changes in response to the climate emergency, but it's not enough. It's not politics. But yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was moving.
Great. And for me, at least, it's also like a little trip down memory lane but also maybe again an urgent reminder of what needs to be done, because we haven't done enough. So maybe your point is very true, that individual recycling, the 3 R's or the 5 R's that there are today, aren't enough. So we need a bigger and bolder response.
Think how inspiring if at the end of that video they showed a huge protest. You know, that's yeah, that's the answer to me, is that, you know, we the people need to use our power to not ask politicians, but to demand and to be willing to non-violently enforce those demands. Is, yeah, that's the way.
I think that's a really good in encouragement here. And now, obviously, it's time for your questions out there that you can ask using the hashtag #AskClimatePunk. And thank you for all of those who have already supplied and given us the questions. And obviously, also remember to ask your questions to our next guest coming up using the hashtag #AskClimatePunk. How can I have a conversation around climate and the climate emergency with my children without scaring them?
The most important thing is to honestly be able to tell your children that you are doing everything that you can to fight this crisis, and that in fact this is something that you can do together as a family.
Great, lovely, good answer there. We have another one, a short one. Maybe you don't, maybe you have. Who's your favorite activist and why?
That's impossible, but I will point to one activist group that I think is particularly cool, but there's so many. But just want to give a shout out to Scientist Rebellion, scientists taking direct action, getting arrested. It communicates so clearly, much more clearly than another scientific report, just how serious this emergency is.
And were these, this is actually my follow-up question here, were those the same people who did those blindfolded statues?
Yes, and also some of the airport blockades.
Good. I think we definitely have a close to a favorite there from your side. So apparently a more personal question here. So what has been the biggest breakthrough on your journey so far?
For years, the organization that I founded, the Climate Mobilization, was campaigning for climate emergency declarations, that as a way for governments and other institutions to make a clear statement about the scale of the problem and what was necessary. And so we campaigned for like the first 10 US cities to declare a climate emergency. And then it spread all over the world and became Oxford English Dictionary's word of the year, climate emergency, in 2019. So it was a campaign that successfully broke through in terms of language, that now it's very normal to talk about the climate emergency. But of course, there's also limitations to that. It's so anyway, but it was a breakthrough, a communications breakthrough.
Amazing, and definitely a very, very good answer to that question. That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much, Margaret. And don't forget, all of you, to get your hands on Margaret's book, Facing the Climate Emergency, 2nd edition. Be the best climate punk you can be. Follow our mission on social, and you don't want to miss our next episode. We've got a really exciting guest for you, and you can participate by asking your questions to our guest using the hashtag #AskClimatePunk. See you soon.